Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
A think tank on high pay says top bosses will have earned more by lunchtime today than typical workers take home in the entire year. The High Pay Centre says that midday, on what it calls Fat Cat Wednesday, is the time some executives will pass the average UK salary of £28,200. The government is considering plans to make firms reveal the pay gap between chief executives and average workers.
But let's begin with the moolah. Let's follow the money. Let's show me the Benjamins. The number that actually hit me around the back of the head this morning when I was listening to the news was not the figures paid to the FTSE 100 chief execs whose income has already superseded yours by lunchtime today, if you're on the national average. It was actually a little item about the industrial action that some British Airways cabin crew are due to take next week. And it was the information that the starting salary for junior cabin crew at British Airways is £12,000 a year. And what fascinates me, and what I think has to become, if we can just move through the ludicrous distractions of arguments about the likes of foreign aid and health tourism and all the things that the right wing are going to want you to talk about now instead of your own pay packet, it's how you react to that news that fascinates me most. Because we're all very much insulated from other people's experiences. Very much. Not a good thing or a bad thing, just a statement of fact. I heard that figure and I goggled. I was staggered that it was such a low figure, £12,000. Start doing sums in your head about minimum wage, timesing it by the number of hours in a day, the number of days in a week. And I know, I don't want to get bogged down in the wrinkles on this. You get a per diem when you're flying with BA. You pay for your accommodation and your food if you have to stay overnight, and the company argues that somehow counts as payment rather than actual subsistence. But the point is, it's that number there, that £12,000 starting salary for junior cabin crew. Right, top of your head, if I'd asked you, and you knew nothing about it, this doesn't work if your mum is a cabin crew or something like that. Top of your head, if I said to you, what do you reckon the starting salary is for British Airways, not one of the sort of bucket lines or the budget lines, starting salary for British Airways cabin crew, what would you have said? I don't think anybody would have gone close to 12 grand, would you? Or because that's what I mean, would you? I don't know. It will depend partly what you're on, and then you'll weigh up what you do against what they do, and you'll try and come up with a number. But for most people, I would have thought that that's a fairly staggeringly low sum. And yet it's fairly commonplace. This is the big story of our time, that they are desperate. We don't talk about. That's why every day when you open your newspapers, they say, talk about foreign aid, talk about health tourism, talk about foreign aid, talk about health tourism. Don't talk about British men and women, young British men and women, our sons and daughters, being paid a wage for doing what used to be a respectable job that is borderline indentured labour. £12,000. Now, is anybody shouting at me yet? That's that. I'd love to know. Is anybody shouting at me? What am I being now? Am I being some sort of Marxist or an idealist? Because the other side of this story, surely, is this rather clever little confection put together today by the High Pay Centre, who've decided to dub today Fat Cat Wednesday because of the revelation that it takes the average chief executive of a leading business 2.5 days to earn an average salary, which is more than double the starting salary for the cabin crew who are going on strike next week. So the average national salary at the moment is just north of £28,000, £28,200. If it takes 2.5 days for them to earn that, that means it takes, we're going to do this sum in my head, you're 1.25, I think less than a day, under a day to earn what starting cabin crew at British Airways who are taking industrial action next week earn in a year. It takes less than a day for these guys to earn what it takes cabin crew to earn in an entire year. Now, I'm not actually unduly troubled by the size of this pay packet if it wasn't balanced out on the other side of the argument by the paucity of everybody else's. This seems to me to be the point that politicians on the left have completely missed or completely failed to make. If Tony Pidgley, who heads up the Berkeley Group, or who else we got? Bob Dudley at BP. He's on a mere 13.3 million. A couple on more than 20. The guy that founded WPP, a very, very clever man, Sir Martin Sorrell, he had a kind of dividend bonus scheme in place last year that pushed his salary north of £70 million, which is huge, right? Absolutely huge. £70 million. But that per se is not bad. Right? If everybody employed by WPP was happy with their wage or earning a demonstrably decent amount of money, and I don't know whether they are or not, then it doesn't matter how much the boss gets paid. It's this figure here. It's interesting. Everyone who's actually answered that question, I said, how much off the top of your head would you imagine the starting salary is at British Airways? Everyone's gone for double. Everyone's gone for £24,000 or more. But the point is surely that figure of the Barclays Bank boss, the guy who, if you will, in 1979 would have been earning loads more than the rest of the workforce, but not to a factor as great as it is today. £6,000 average pay in 1979. Head of Barclays Bank got 87,323, okay? He now gets, he doesn't even make the top 10, he's just outside the top 10, he now gets £8 million. So his salary has gone up from 87 to 8 million. The average salary has gone up from 6,000 to 28,000. So that is by a factor of 4 point something that the average salary has gone up. The salary of the boss has gone up by a factor of, I should always be careful of doing numbers in my head, shouldn't I? But it's gone up by a factor of a lot more than that. You can write that down, take it to the bank. And that's what I genuinely don't understand. So there's two questions here. How has it happened? 0345 6060973. That simple disparity. But also, why do we put up with it? I'm interested in the mechanics of how it happened. Because it's happened incrementally. As we say this a lot on the programme at the moment, it's like boiling a frog. And I know some of my lines are lazy, or at least predictable. Quick, look over there, foreign aid. I've just given myself another massive pay rise while the average income of my staff has gone down. But surely this is at the very, very heart of everything that politics is supposed to address. Why is Donald Trump president of America? Because significant swathes of the country think that they should have more money in their pocket, and they don't understand why they don't. Why have we voted for Brexit? Because significant swathes of this country think that they should somehow be better off, and therefore they're going to break the system that we live under currently in the hope that the new system will somehow deliver more. It almost certainly won't, but the frustration at the status quo has become so huge that people are prepared effectively to jump off a cliff in the hope of sprouting wings before they hit the ground. And yet, really, if the question is going to be, why haven't we got more money in our pocket? And I use we as a citizen, as a patriot, as someone who would like people who earn a lot less than I do to have more. I use we as a subscriber to society, to the concept of society. And that's why it has to be done through taxation and legislation. It can't be done voluntarily. It's like if I asked you now, could you imagine, well, if you were offered £80 million a year, would you take it? What a fatuous inquiry that would be. It's almost like saying if you found a winning lottery ticket under your pillow tonight, would you give it to the RNLI, or would you go and cash it in yourself? It's so stupid. It's a bit like the argument about refugees having to be in your bedroom if you think that we should be rescuing drowning children from the Mediterranean. It means you've got to put 30 of them up in your spare room. It's absurd. It completely ignores the role of society. That's the lesson, if you will, of 2016. They're trying to kill society. They're trying to make it so individualistic and so selfish that we stop wondering about anybody else. I think that 70 million quid is too much for anyone to earn in the current climate. Oh, all right then, well, would you turn it down? Come on. Can we at least exercise 4 brain cells before arriving at a self-serving, punching ourselves in the face conclusion? Why? And I've made a mistake. I knew this would happen. I shouldn't have gone in on BA. Everyone's ringing me up about BA. I don't want to talk about BA. We'll talk about that next week when they're actually on strike. I want to talk about wages. Very, very clearly, I want to talk about wages. And I want to talk about why we are sitting idly by Or actually, no, let's do it this way. You help me out today, okay? Is there any way you can argue that paying these guys 70 million, 23 million, 16 million, 14 million, 10 million, 8 million, is there any way you can prove to me that that is not part of the reason why most people in this country feel undervalued and underpaid? 16 million British citizens cannot get their hands on £100 cash by lunchtime today. They simply can't get their hands on that kind of money. Do you know what? I would love to believe that that situation is down to something other than the fact that all the money's going somewhere else. Foreign aid, health tourism, 0.7% of our national expenditure, 0.3% of the NHS's outgoings. Quick, over there, foreign aid, health tourism. Don't get cross about some fella earning 23.2 million while your children will be lucky to start their working lives on 12.5 grand. Look, rescue me from my leftist hell. Explain to me why there is no link between these two phenomena. Why the fact that the boss of Barclays has seen his salary go up by a factor of about 100 since 1979, while the average national wage has gone up by a factor of about 4. Wow. We're just nuts, aren't we? We are becoming a nation of forelock-tugging, deferential muppets. Why shouldn't someone get paid £70 million a year? Oh, it's well, it's not our place, is it, to question it? If you want to earn that sort of money, you go and get a job like that. Oh, yes. Oh, and if they're not paying tax on it, well, that's fine, because I wouldn't pay tax either. It's just the fetishization of selfishness that we're looking at, and it will be our children that pay, even more than we do. 0345 6060 973 is the number you need. I know I haven't really asked you a clear question, but you usually indulge me on these sort of issues. Tell me why it doesn't bother you. That would really intrigue me. Or why you don't think there's a link between the massive explosion of executive pay and the stagnation or indeed reduction in average income. And I've checked the sums, and give or take a few quid, right? The boss of Barclays earns 100 times what he earned in 1979. 100 times. The average national wage has gone up by about 4 times. 100 times for the boss, 4 times for the average worker. Why? How? What next? 0345 6060 973. Is Lewis in Surbiton right when he says, James, sadly people will always ignore the people at the top, as they will always dream of one day being that person earning ludicrous sums and not paying tax? Is it that simple? Or is that distraction tactic of immigration, foreign aid, health tourism, is that so effective that now if you're one of the people that swallowed all that, you look at this wage, you look at your own pay packet, and you look at a bloke earning £23.3 million a year, and you feel like such an idiot for being taken in that you have to double down on your own stupidity. You have to double down. No, it's absolutely fine for people to earn that sort of money. The real problem is health tourism and foreign aid. Because you have to double down if you've bought it, don't you? You can't. It's like, you know who the best customers are for mail scammers? You know, when vulnerable people get a letter through their letterbox telling them that they're due to come into about $25 million if they just provide their bank details to somebody in East Africa. Do you know who the best customers are for that? The people who've already fallen for it. They come back for more and more and more because this is Brexit in a nutshell, isn't it? It's so hard for people to admit that they've been conned that they actually keep handing over their money, keep handing over their cash in order to cling to the notion that they haven't been conned. I just don't know. And again, I stress, it's got nothing to do with individuals and everything to do with society. 0345 6060 973. How would you account, historically, politically, economically, for the very simple fact that in 1979, the boss of Barclays earned roughly 1/100th of what he earns now. The rest of us earned, or the national average, I won't say us, because obviously I'm blessed in a sense that I earn a lot more than the national average, but I keep a very close eye on these things because I care about, quotes, society, end quotes. The national average was about a quarter of what it is now. So boss's wage goes up by 100, ordinary worker's wage goes up times 4. How has it happened? I actually don't know, but you might be older than me. George is in Croydon. George, what's going on?
Hello, James.
Hello, George.
It should be no surprise to people who know what's going on that the ultra-rich get kind of exponentially richer while the poor don't, because the system is designed to actually create that outcome.
But it's the same. It's the same system that we had in 1979, George. So I appreciate that it's tempting to see this as an invitation to have a crack at capitalism in general, but that's not what I want to do today. I want to look at why, in the years since 1979, these factors have changed so markedly, because capitalism 1979 is the same as capitalism 2016, or perhaps it isn't.
Well, the mechanism that we all live with for money creation is that we allow private banks to create money out of nothing.
'Twas ever thus. 'Twas ever thus.
And lend it to our government.
'Twas ever thus. So again, I'll just remind you once more, this is not an invitation to have a crack at capitalism. Explain to me what's happened since 1979.
Well, it's not even having a crack at capitalism, and communism works the same way. When you've got a central bank creating money...
Okay, so what's happened since 1979 to explain why the average wage has gone up by a factor of 4 and the boss's wage has gone up by a factor of 100?
Well, here we have, LBC leading Britain's conversation up the garden path. I mean, if you're not prepared to look at the basic thing,
right.
The basic
so you can't answer the question then.
I'm not going to answer the question because you're dictating a conversation that's leading us away from
what has happened since 1979, George?
The answer is about the system, I'm afraid, James.
But it's the same system that we had in 1979.
You are misleading people, okay, if you don't want to talk about the system.
You're such a wally.
That's right, I'm a wally.
So what's happened since 1979? One more go.
I'm a wally, James, because you're not going to allow...
George, you can talk all you want. It's not. I thought this was the least controversial question in the history of the programme. How have we seen, since 1979, the boss's wage go up by a factor of 100 and the average wage go up by a factor of 4? One more go, George.
It's the nature of an exponential curve. It's maths. If you look at...
So why didn't it go up between 1945 and 1979 by the same amount?
Because in an exponential curve keeps getting steeper. It gets steeper. That's the nature of the curve.
You've just answered my question by repeating it. Why has the gap got so much bigger? Because it has, James. How dare you mislead the nation? How dare you lead Britain up the garden path? George, why has the gap got so big? Why has the factors diverged so hugely? Because they have, you idiot. It's the system, you fool. How dare you censor me and close me down? George, I hope you have a lovely day. Wally was meant very affectionately, mate. Lee's in Greenwich. Lee, you can do better than that. Frankly, I think my goldfish could do better than that, but it's over to you now.
Probably not really, because I was only about 8 in 1979, so I don't know the full history from 79 to...
Same here, I was 7 actually. I was 7, but we can all count. I mean, how the hell can your wage, the average wage, have gone up by a factor of 4, the boss's has gone up by a factor of 100, and we're getting cross about, I don't know, some woman from Czechoslovakia coming here to give birth?
Right, okay. So obviously, I mean, because I know you love Euro, so the point being, not everyone's getting 100 times more. I mean, I run my own business. I ain't been able to give myself a pay rise since I started.
But chief executives of FTSE 100 companies...
but they're all big companies. That just tells you that they're doing better then, doesn't it? Because
no, mate, because Barclays Bank... Oh, Lee, mate. Barclays Bank was a big company in 1979.
But not as big now. It probably weren't making as much profit.
Of course it was.
There, James.
Of course it was.
Well, I don't think it was. If you was to go back to 79, what their net profit was and what it is now, I think it'd be a lot more than what it is.
So you think they're
now.
making 100 times more now than they made in 1979? And even if they are, why has that not been passed on to everybody in the company? Why does it only go to the bottom? You're answering my question without intending to, aren't you?
Because it always goes to the top people. That's just common. That's just like...
Okay, let me try again. Let me try again. In 1979, it didn't. What has happened in the ensuing years to see this disparity magnified on such an epic scale? I think you've told me without realising it. Haven't you?
To be honest with you, I don't really know.
No, I know you don't. But you've told me without realising it. Because you're tugging your forelock, mate, aren't you? You're going, well, it's not our place to question this, Mr. James, sir. It's not our place. The rich have always got the rich. All the money always goes to the squire, Mr. James, sir. It's not our place to do it. We might steal the odd rabbit. I run my own business, but I know all the money always got... That's the answer, isn't it? You don't care.
Yeah, but what can you do about it? I mean,
what can you do about it? Exactly.
Why are you so jealous?
Well, jealous?
Why are you so jealous of people?
I'm jealous of people by saying that poor people should earn more. I'm jealous.
But why should you... So, all right, so if you're an idiot, you didn't do that well at school or whatever, you had the opportunity, but you didn't seize that opportunity. That's the person that did, and now he's on £1 million a year.
But why is he on so much more than he was in 1979? Mate, you're brilliant. You're the perfect caller.
I don't know. Why am I paying so much in council tax, yet the services I get there come nowhere near what we used to get in 1979?
This is
where
it.
we had good council services.
We didn't have council tax. We didn't have council tax in 1979. But it doesn't matter, because you're answering my question without intent. Why don't we get cross about this? Because we are becoming, or perhaps we always have been, a nation of forelock tuggers. How much does that guy earn? £23.3 million. Oh, he's good for it, James. He's good for it, James. Not for the likes of us. Didn't pay attention at school. Oh, no. £12,000 for my children. £23.3 million for him. That's absolutely fine. Foreign aid, and health tourism, they're the things we should be getting really cross about. Or bin collections. It's too big, is it? Is it just too big and too far away? That's possibly what it is. Dick is in Chelmsford. Dick? I'll come to you. Hang on, mate. I've just glanced at the clock. I'm a little late for the news. Phones are ringing off the hook. I'll be with you first after the very latest news headlines. Coming up later in the programme, I might stay with this for a little bit longer, or I might try to bleed it into the Finnish experiment, in which the unemployed are being paid a guaranteed basic income of nearly £6,000 a year. This is a way in which, well, you address some of the inequalities and problems that we are describing today, and unintentionally answering the question of how the hell it's been allowed to go on. Answer: because it's not our place to question it. With a little bit of sleight of hand, by which I simply mean my arithmetic's pretty close to the bone, but not as close as the whole numbers allow. The boss of Barclays has seen his wage go up by a factor of 100 since 1979, whereas the average national income has gone up by a factor of 4. How have we allowed this to happen? Answer, quite beautifully but unintentionally, from Lee just before the news, is anybody who says, that's a bit rum, isn't it? That's a bit dodge. Our kids are starting jobs now. Comparing with my producer, our first jobs, there's a 10-year age difference between us. Our first jobs in this business, mine was 3 days a week for £4,000 more than she got 10 years later for a full-time job in similar levels of media. So it's just gone down. The boss's wages, meanwhile, have all gone up. Why? Answer: well, as Lee showed, anyone who questions it must be jealous. So that tabloid trick of the so-called politics of envy is going to be part of the answer. 1979, trade unions. 2016, Dick is in Chelmsford. Dick, over to you.
Hi there. I'm one of these guys that feels just a little bit terribly sad for the cabin crew, and I just don't know how they manage on that, really. And what happens if your fridge dies? I mean, for goodness sake.
It's the 16 million people who haven't got £100, but they'll be like Lee. They'll be queuing up to say anyone who complains about it is the politics of envy, and if we all hang up and stand in line, our time will come.
Very true. I mean, I work at a food bank, so I know that people are living on kettle food alone, and so on. But I rang in just to say that I'm one of those guys that sort of feels a bit guilty about possibly taking advantage of being able to cream it a bit towards the end of my career. And it didn't do me any good internally, you know. It didn't make me feel good about things.
It's nice to be wealthy, though. It gives you choices, doesn't it?
Pass money on to their kids and all that sort of thing, but I was a GP and I retired and I got bored, so I went back and just sort of looking around with jobs and so on. I was able to just say, well, I'll have 200 quid an hour, please, or I'll have 300 quid an hour, please. And
but there's nothing wrong with that unless the person cleaning the surgery is on tuppence halfpenny an hour. Do you sometimes think I'm going mad? It was such a statement of the obvious, but some people find that controversial.
Well, I think that I think probably I did take advantage, and I do feel sad for the guys that, you know, were coming in and they were saying, well, actually, don't give me 2 prescriptions because I can only afford 1.
Wow.
Now, you know, that's the sort of thing.
What do you think then? Because you mentioned that you're retired, Dick, so you've got a few more miles on the clock than I have. 1979 is not an arbitrary year to choose because, of course, it's the year that Margaret Thatcher came to power. How do you account for the change? Because actually, I think in general terms, a GP's status and income has probably gone down since 1979. But the overall gap between the worker and the boss, why do you think it's been allowed to run out of control so wildly?
Well, you've mentioned 2 points here. Firstly is, you know, what a GP is doing. In 79, we were averaging 80, 90 hours a week, no doubt about it. There were very few female GPs who were part-time as they are now, etc. So I don't want to go into too much.
I meant generally. I didn't just mean your profession. I meant as a society. How have we sat idly by while the average income has gone up by a factor of 4, and bosses now have earned as much by lunchtime today as most people in this country will earn by the end of the year?
I'm not a bright politician type like you, but looking at...
Save it, mate.
Go from Thatcher all the way through. Blair's just to sort of...
Absolutely. That's why I like this. I like the broad scope of this period, because you got Labour governments and Conservative governments in it. Where Peter Mandelson said, we are supremely comfortable with people earning huge amounts of money. And I understood that, and I nodded along, because you presume that in brackets you add as long as nobody is being shafted. 0-hour contracts, getting a phone call on a Monday morning to tell you whether you've got any hours this week. You tell them that you're busy and they take away the hours that you've got. All of these things surely help explain how anyone can be taking home 10 million quid at the end of the year. Wow. Dick, thank you. If you're trying to get through and failing, grab the phone line that he's just vacated. Tom is in Gravesend. Tom, what do you think has happened? Maybe nothing's happened. Maybe it is just a sort of incremental change in society. But what do you think?
Well, yeah, I thought when you mentioned Margaret Thatcher that you're sort of on the right line, because what she did is she changed the attitude of the worker. She made, said, if you work hard, you can get the rewards, but you deserve that because you're earning, you're working hard, and you can get that. And that really changed the mindset of the worker, because then we feel like, oh, if people are earning loads of money, they've worked really hard to get that money.
And who is going to be the most furious listening to this programme today? It's the people that bought the idea but are today skint, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And they can't admit that they were wrong to buy the idea, so they're the ones that have to come out with the lines about jealousy or politics of envy or why don't you tell us how much you earn, because they're hearing someone criticising a system that he's benefited from and they've suffered from, but they still can't admit that they got it wrong for backing that political idea.
Exactly. And the fact is that we see people in low-income workers, they're like, oh, obviously they're not working hard enough to actually get...
You want to earn more money, get a better job.
Yeah, exactly. But then we're not realising that some of these workers are working 2 days a week, 2 jobs just to feed their families, because they're on such poor money. They have to leave school at an early age because they didn't have the opportunities or luck to go and get an education, to go and to university.
Or just because society should look after people at the bottom and then wait for the benefits of that to pass upwards to the top. You get a workforce that is healthy, you get a workforce that is educated, you get a workforce that is well nourished and well fed and secure and homed and housed, and that all moves up to the employers. But we seem since 1979 to have turned it on its head. And this notion of trickle-down economics, you sit down there tugging your forelock, waiting your turn, and the money will come down to you eventually. And then when it doesn't, someone else steps into the picture and says, immigrants. And it's job done.
Yeah, and now with globalization getting huge and the sums of money that you hear people having, that it just means that, it's only 8 million. That's not much. It's not 8 million isn't scary anymore. It's not a big amount to people. When you get...
Why is that then? Why is that? I mean, you can be as simplistic as you want on this. Why is that not a bigger... Is it too big to contemplate, or is it because the lottery or something like that has made something feel within reach when previously it never would have done?
Yeah, and you just hear certain costs, this will cost £2 billion. That seems huge to people. So then 8 million, that's not so much. I can go and win that if I buy a lottery ticket. That is it. Millions seem like in grasp to people. And I think, actually, we could probably earn that. If you work hard, or actually we could win that in the lottery. That's not that much. You see cars and boats that people have that are worth millions, hundreds of millions. So people are like, that's a lot of money. Whereas millions now, it's not as big. It's not as big as it used to be.
Yeah, there's part of that. And then you've got that old Steinbeck line, as there being no such thing as poverty in the Depression era of America. They're just temporarily frustrated millionaires. But why? Since 79 in particular, has it become so profound? Why is it even controversial? I think we answered that partly. I mean, if you were listening to this as someone who'd signed up for the Thatcherite dream, and now you have to put your hand up to ask permission to go to the toilet, and if your boiler breaks, you could be absolutely screwed this winter. You've been had, but you're not going to admit it. So you have to get cross with people who've done well out of the system, but still criticise it. The champagne socialists. So if you're skint and you don't like it, politics of envy. If you've got a few quid and you think it's unfair, champagne socialist. Who's allowed to criticise? Answer: nobody. Tom's in Graves. No, just did Tom. Let's go to Aaron in St Albans. Aaron, what would you like to say?
Hi there, how's it going?
Very well, mate. What's on your mind?
I'm thinking slightly philosophically here, and possibly I'm going to mess my words up, so I hope I'll
Don't worry.
get this clear.
It's a safe space for philosophers.
Good.
Not a safe space for dodgy phone lines, though, mate. We'll try and fix that, I promise you. Bob is in Walton-on-Thames. Bob, 1979 to 2016, an almost unbelievable increase in wage for boss and an almost unbelievable lack of increase in wage for worker. What's happened?
I'll tell you why.
Come on.
I was born in 1945.
Okay.
From 1945 to 1979, there was basically austerity in this country. We weren't very well off, were we?
Well, no, I mean, again, you were there, I wasn't. But when Macmillan said Macmillan said you've never had it so good, I think he was probably right.
We weren't very well off, but there was fairness because wages and salaries were pretty evenly distributed.
Yeah.
Workers got less, but basically it was fairer society. 1979, Thatcher took over. She had a down on workers' pay increases. She had the miners' strike, all the rest of the things. She legislated against unions. That took us up to 1991. Then we had 8 years of the grey man who did nothing really, basically. And after that, we had Blair's neo-Toryism government. Yeah. And after that, we've had what we got now, you know. The reason why CEOs get much more, 100 times more than ordinary workers is, most workers are public workers. Public workers, the shareholders are the government, and the government has kept their wages down. If the public workers' wages are down, then those wages of all workers in the country stay down with them. There's sort of like a rule there, you know.
Of course.
CEOs get together in closed rooms together, and they sort out their salaries for each other. Like SO sort out, BP
I mean,
sort out.
Sometimes I wonder if we overcomplicate things. You're right. Who's signing that cheque? Well, I am. And who's it payable to? Me. Win-win.
The government, are the shareholders of public workers. The shareholders of private companies don't have any say in what the CEOs earn.
And when Theresa May suggests following the German model and putting an ordinary worker on the board, your lazy right-wing knee-jerkers go absolutely nuts.
Well, that's what you need. That's what we need.
Of course you do.
We need to open doors to these pay negotiations for the CEOs, like we have for ordinary workers. It's all in the open. But the CEOs, they just announced, I mean, from 79 to today, I would think CEOs have probably pay rises of something like 10% per annum on average.
Yeah.
Now, you work out 10% per annum, and that's where you get your finger 100 times.
Is it just winners versus losers? And what? Because no, I don't mean in literal terms. I mean in metaphorical, in what people perceive in perception terms. Because the other thing that happened in 79, of course, was that the accelerator got depressed on Rupert Murdoch's ownership of newspapers, and that was absolutely contingent upon breaking the unions. And the print unions deserved a bit of a slap. They didn't deserve to be utterly annihilated, but they deserved to be. They deserved to be dragged into line. But what the newspapers have done, first the Murdoch Press and the Mail, they've created an idea that says, hey, yes, do you know what? Society is unfair, but you should be in favour of unfairness because you'll be on the right side of it. And of course, by the time you realise that you're on the wrong side of it, you've got too much invested politically and ideologically to stand up and say, whoa, hang on a minute, I've been had.
Can I just say one more thing?
Of course you can.
This week, it was announced that people should get their tax returns in by the end of January, otherwise you get a fine of £100. Okay?
Yeah.
At the same time, people are sort of discussing these rich people sending their money abroad and not paying tax on it. Now, ordinary workers get caned by £100 if they just make a mistake on their form or don't get it in on time.
Yeah.
But the rich people who invest abroad, they're not really being hunted down at all, are they? There's a token effort. And the reason why there's a token effort is because the people that are interested in catching them are the people themselves in doing it.
And I mean, also factor into that this weird narrative which goes alongside champagne socialism, politics of envy. Well, you'd do it if you could. I mean, you get that out there as well. You'd do it if you could. You'd do it if you... When's the last time you turned down a bonus? You'd dodge tax if you could. But the point is, you can't. Ordinary workers can't take advantage of these mechanisms, and they end up paying a higher percentage of their income than someone who's earning 100 times more than they are. But to complain about that, it's the politics of envy. It's brilliant. It's like the mother of all confidence tricks that's been pulled off on the people of this country. And when you compare ourselves to other European countries, you can see the scale of this. You know why our rail tickets are so expensive? Because we're subsidising the railways in Germany and France. whose governments have significant stakes in our own transport infrastructure. And strong trade unions and workers' representatives at board level. No wonder they wanted us out of the European Union. We might have woken up and noticed. It's 10:47. We've probably solved quite a big part of this problem, but it's a waste of time. No one will notice, no one will hear, because if you'd been sold a scam, if you'd bought into a con and suffered as a result, things have to get infinitely worse before you'll admit that you've been conned. We're not actually talking about Brexit yet. We'll talk about that later in the programme. But the bottom line is that the people who succumb to those mail scams, it's one of the most interesting and heartbreaking articles I've ever read. The people who actually send off their money because they think that they're about to get a share of the inheritance of Mr. Arthur MacArthur, lately of Mombasa or wherever it may be. We've all read the emails. The people who actually send money off are 10 times more likely to send more than someone new to be scammed. They're at a premium. You con them, they will not admit it. So if you bought into Thatcherism in 1979, and today you're trying to work out why the average wage of a boss has gone up by a factor of about 100, where the average wage of a worker has gone up by a factor of about 4, you've got two choices. Either you realise you've been conned, or you start talking about foreign aid and champagne socialism. There is no middle ground. That's it. You either say, crikey, I completely messed that up. What a mess I've made. What an absolute mess I've made. I've helped create a country in which my children are going to be on £12,000 a year working for someone on 20 million. Whereas in 1979, my children would have been on 12,000 and the boss would have been on $250,000 or 2 million, not 20 million. That's the point. There's nothing wrong with earning a lot of money. It's a question of where the money comes from. Or, oh no, it's all because of immigration, James, and you're a champagne socialist. There is no third line on this. You're welcome to try to prove me wrong on 0345 6060 973. But the last fellow who did took 30 seconds before he started calling me jealous. You're just jealous. So you sit here saying, I think people should earn more than £12,000 a year. I really do. And if you're going to ask me where that money should come from within that company, well, I'd start at the people getting the most. Why are you so jealous? Hey? I think people should earn more than £12,000 a year. Champagne socialism. I think people should earn more than £12,000 a year. I don't think our children should be expected to start their lives on such a pathetic income in companies where people have been paid millions and millions and millions of pounds. It's politics of envy. You're such a champagne socialist. But I'm talking about people on 12 grand a year. I don't envy them. Ooh, it was because of immigration then. Yeah, it's because we're spending all that money on foreign aid. We can't afford to pay cabin crew more. We're flying all the money to Pakistan, James. That's why. Come on, guys. It's probably already too late. Jack's in Bromley. Jack, what's on your mind?
Hi, James. I'm interested in a couple of things. One was luck, and the other one was footballers as a bit of a parallel. So, first of all, with the luck, I think it ties into the sort of 80s Thatcherism. There's a kind of like loss of sort of any recognition of luck. I don't think people talk about it much now. This sense that, you know, needing ability is one thing.
Yes. Needing
to put in the hard work is another thing. But then another thing is there's an element of luck. There's always an element of luck.
You missed a show just before Christmas, I sent, in which we identified those three factors: chutzpah, talent.
Yeah, I did miss that.
Chutzpah, talent, and luck. And thinking over the back of my career, wondering what I'd rather have had most of at various different stages. and chutzpah and luck are generally going to get you further down the road than talent is.
Because it was I think Professor Robert Frank I heard talking about this on a program. He's written a book about it recently, and he was sort of promoting his
well,
book.
Trump's the apotheosis of this. Trump was born on third base, but thinks he scored a home run. He doesn't think luck's played the slightest part in his success, and yet, obviously, if he'd been born poor, he'd probably be receiving treatment now in a secure facility.
But then in terms of the footballers as well, I think that's an interesting parallel for the sort of CEO escalation in wages that we've seen, because I think there's a consensus. Lots of people like football, big fans of football, fine, but I think there's a general consensus. Everyone kind of thinks that footballers' money is ridiculous. It's escalated hugely, and everyone kind of seems to be in agreement about that it's quite mad. And then you see that, well, why has that happened? Well, I guess it's because, here's a footballer, he gets this much. Oh, another one comes along.
So it's within reach. So they've managed. But that's why I mentioned the lottery earlier. So you have this notion that these epic riches are somehow within reach, which is why we tolerate other people getting them, despite the fact that they are impoverishing the rest of us.
But I mean,
was that an of agreement or an of tolerance?
No, I think so. That's the thing. I think to the CEOs, I agree with you. For the footballers, I think that's why it's a good example, because I think most people would look at professional footballers and say, well, you know, I can kick a football around, but I'm not as good as that guy. But they still think he doesn't deserve that money. You know, you see what I mean? They appreciate that he's very good at football, but people, in terms of football, people see that the money does not relate to the hard work or the ability. It's mad, you know, whereas they don't see that for other, you know, people work hard.
I don't know that I agree with you. I don't know that there is a particular groundswell of resentment against how much footballers get paid.
Perhaps not resentment.
Bafflement.
I think you're right. I think it's a similar thing. Oh, well, you know, I don't really understand why, but I don't mind it that much. But it is mad. A kind of recognition that it's mad, but not kind of really that passionate about it. So I guess,
also it's bread and circuses. So football is so removed from the quotidian, from the ordinary experience. Although you might dream of being a footballer, it's very different from your own actual boss earning £20 million. But I guess the fact that you can point at your favourite footballer and see them earning similar money to your boss, and it somehow makes it more palatable that your boss is on that kind of buns. Do you think? I don't like your I think you're what's the word? Not tolerating. What's the word? My 10-year-old does it with me. Kind of just sort of nodding along, going, "Yes, Dad, that's right. All right, Dad. Now take your tablets."
No, I think there's something in that. I think it's but it's just what surprises me is, like you just said just before I came on, the kind of like the disinterestedness. That's the main thing that gets me. Like, people just don't seem that bothered about it all.
Because they've bought the Striver-Skyver line. They bought the idea that you're allowed this sort of money, you know, that there's nothing unremarkable about it. I mean, people boast about it. You get someone who says, "Don't bash the bankers," and then, you know, a few years later they'll be writing newspaper columns about how it's absolutely fine that someone earns £70 million a year, and if you're on 12 grand a year, then tough, it's your fault. Work harder. You could be on £70 million yourself. It's just the biggest lie of all. It's a sweet shop. That's what it is. It's the sweet shop, and they've sold you the idea that you can get into the sweet shop, but actually you're going to spend your whole life with your face pressed up against the window. And if you suggest at any point that you should be able to get some sweets, you're going to be accused of the politics of envy. Ian's in Purley. Ian, what's going on?
Hi, James. Morning. Some of this may have already been covered, but the whole effect of the reason why banks and bankers are earning such vast amounts of money actually relates to both the Thatcher government and the Blair government, because
deregulation.
87, Thatcher kicked it off with the Big Bang, but also Gordon Brown and Tony Blair, when he came in 97, one of his first things to do was deregulate banks. And when you're running your own institution and you're responsible only to your board of directors who set your own pay, greed and avarice will necessarily just almost, you can't help it.
And who in that room, who in that boardroom, when they're setting their pay for themselves, is going to put their hand up and say, well, actually, has anyone considered we should all take a little bit less and share it out among the cashiers, share it among the shop floor? You're going to be laughed out of the boardroom. You're going to be laughed out of the city. Whereas perhaps naively, I do believe that in the in different eras, in the 60s, perhaps, certainly in the post-war period, where there was a huge debt of gratitude to the ordinary working people of this country, you wouldn't have been laughed out of the boardroom for suggesting that. And you can't do it voluntarily. That's the problem, because human nature. You have to do it through legislation and taxation. But that, of course, is the politics of envy.